Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, Ethernet Chart Fitness. Today we're going to talk about weed, the peace-providing commodity that doesn't need a marketing team or sales pitch to continually sell at an astronomical scale. So let's just start. I do want to clarify that weed itself does not make you lazy, okay? You make yourself lazy, and all the, the historical propaganda out there about weed making people lazy and losers and stoners and that type of stuff is, it's been incorrectly taught, unjustly served in the legal system, and many of the medicinal benefits of weed have been understated. So, but as a personal trainer who focuses on assisting those with addictive behaviors, I think it's important to still touch on how we can create addictive relationships with marijuana and how we best want to avoid that, okay? So I want to provide some guidance and tips for those who have developed problems with their cannabis consumption. Maybe you might not be familiar with how the endocannabinoid system works as well. And so the context of this article is for those that are ready to be educated a little bit on the endocannabinoid system, understand their addictive behaviors with marijuana, and feel perhaps they lack direction in their life, and want to consider how they can have a better approach holistically to their mental health. And of course, every individual is different. There's going to be outliers. There's people that can consume marijuana all the time, daily, but maybe they just understand their behaviors better. They don't have major problems with it. They're still very motivated. They're still very productive. Just like alcohol, right? I'm sure there's hundreds of CEOs out there running huge companies, alcoholics, doing incredible things. So it happens, but this is, in the context of the majority, and especially for those people that get addicted. So we gotta understand that cannabis and especially alcohol, they can be crutches for people who are living, anxious and they feel unhappy with their life. And so of course there's outliers, but let's get into it now. And so remember, historically marijuana, it's been mischaracterized, it's been vilified. The prohibition propaganda out there was sparked by like Harry Anslinger way back in the day. He was a commissioner of like the US Treasury Department's Federal Bureau of Narcotics. That was like in the 1930s and 40s. There was a lot of racist implications against Mexicans and African Americans, and that's what basically led into the legal system today with marijuana, and that's why there's so many minorities in America locked up from marijuana consumption and selling. So obviously that stuff is really ugly and not good. So, but fortunately through the test of time, and now that we're legalizing everything, we got scientific research, we're seeing that there are many scientific applications medicinally, as well as there's the utility to experience states full of awe, creation and appreciation, and humor as well, obviously too. So although there are medical and recreational benefits to experience, there are certainly paves the course of addiction as well, okay? And so the potential for excessive consumption and addiction is what interests me as a personal trainer. And so what gets you high is the endocannabinoid system. And we have this system in our body, the endocannabinoid system. So to understand how cannabis works, we need to know how the endocannabinoid system works. Okay, so we naturally have our own endocannabinoids, which are anandamide and 2-AG. Okay, that's what we're gonna remember, that anandamide and 2-AG. So we have our own endocannabinoids. And the typical pattern of action for these endocannabinoids is they act upon the CB1 and CB2 receptors in the nervous system. So there's a lot of them in your brain, there's a lot in your peripheral nervous system in your body. And so these endocannabinoids, they stimulate these receptors to signal a lot of things, like for instance, increases in appetite, permit proper function of our metabolism, enhance action of the immune system cells. And there's a lot that happens with these CB1 receptors. They also permit synaptic plasticity in the brain, so which wires like new neural connections. This is why you can kind of create new knowledge, new experiences mentally through marijuana or through your own endocannabinoid systems. And so another awesome aspect of the endocannabinoid system is that they help regulate the release of neurotransmitters such as dopamine and serotonin, which are those awesome chemicals that are for making you feel happy, making you feel motivated, and making you feel content. And so naturally, we increase the performance of our own endocannabinoids through, we naturally increase these through things that are very holistic, right? Through like exercise and eating right and sleeping well. And so That's why, like for instance, with exercise, aerobic exercise, you really can stimulate the action of the endocannabinoids. They call that like the runner's high, right? So that's how we activate them. They're always kind of operating in the background, but that's how they work naturally. And so how does weed affect this system? Well, when we consume marijuana, there are two major cannabinoids that affect us, which are THC, which is tetrahydrocannabinol, right? And CBD, which is cannabidiol, or whatever, however you pronounce that. THC and CBD, right? So these things, they act upon the same receptors, CB1 and CB2, just like our natural endocannabinoids do, but they do it at a much crazier level and a much crazier rate. So that's why the high from THC, from marijuana, is so much more intense than our natural system. So THC is what's going to give you that psychoactive, those cerebral sensations in your brain where you're just, everything's going crazy, you're feeling high, crazy thoughts, it's fun, right? And then CBD is more going to act upon your immune system and provide more of like a pain relieving, anti-inflammatory, like neuroprotective effect on your body. Okay, so the way in which cannabis hijacks our endocannabinoid system is pretty fascinating, because it really ignites those CB1, CB2 receptors much more differently, or much more efficaciously, I guess, than our own endocannabinoids. So that's why we like weed, because it just does that stuff intensely. So now that we know how the endocannabinoid system works, we can talk about the benefits of marijuana, right? So that high that we experience leads to states of enhanced divergent thinking. So this is basically when you're high. Divergent thinking means you're going to allow different ideas and concepts to approach your brain, and so that's why you're way more open to new ideas, open to different concepts. You're way more creative, you're enhanced, and you feel a different sense of appreciation, kind of and joy as well, like for the moment that you're living, and also kind of gives you a better gratitude and perspective of where you're living and where you're at in your life. So that's why we like that's the THC, right? And so this kind of happens as well because, like I said, mentioned before, that THC activates in an endocannabinoid system a lot of dopamine and serotonin. And so this is what's going to really help out with releasing or enhancing that synaptic plasticity in the brain. So it's going to help us have better conversations, better understanding of how the world works, right? But also it's a super enriching experience too. And so a lot of people say that their experiences with marijuana, some of the highs they've had, have changed who they are to this day. Like it's been a large part in their personality development, large reason why they became more grateful human beings. So that awesome elated psychoactive state and medicinal properties of CBD, they're quite positive and pretty remarkable. And so that's why there's utility and a place in society for cannabis. Okay, so that's why there's utility in place. So let's get into the concerns now. So we know that people can have issues with having too much weed. We know how the endocannabinoid system works now. We know it gets naturally activated, and weed hijacks that system at a much higher level. So let's look at how we may experience problems with excessive consumption. So first, the endocannabinoid levels. Because THC and CBD hijack the endocannabinoid system, it's going to outcompete your natural and endogenous cannabinoids, the anandamide and 2-AG. So eventually you're going to have lower baseline levels and activity of those natural endocannabinoids. So especially if you're excessively consuming weed, right? And so that's a big reason why people will start to ingest more weed, and they'll have more and more and more because they're having a hard time naturally experience the states that they would be with their own endocannabinoids, okay? So the next concern is verbal memory processing, or working memory. So what happens when you get high, you have some activity within your hippocampus, which is all about memory, that is a little dysregulated. And there's not a lot of debate about this. We all know, if you've been high, that short-term memory loss, we've all experienced that. It's like next thing you know, you don't know what time you put the cookies in the oven. You forgot where you put your phone, you forgot what topic you and your friends were talking about. So we know this happens with marijuana, especially with sativa strands. And so the data out there is pretty interesting because it really proves this too. So there's systematic reviews, meta-analysis, which these are the crown jewels of scientific research. They have shown that chronic consumption of weed is associated with impairments in verbal learning and working memory, as well as moderate deficits in decision making, right? So you're like slower a little bit. This is if you're consuming a lot of marijuana. You're slower, you can't remember what just happened recently, and your working memory is not great. You're like, okay, where's my phone? Yada, yada, you know, that's what happened. Okay, now the number 3 concern, and this kind of leads into the development of things like anxiety and depressive disorders. So let's talk about serotonin and dopamine again. So when you have excessive marijuana consumption, you're likely to be associated with an apathy or irregular synthesis of dopamine in the brain. Okay, and then serotonin is going to be different because it's dramatically increased by marijuana. And serotonin is the molecule of contentment, of peace. So that's why when you have marijuana, you feel very peaceful, very chill. That's what serotonin is doing for you. So when you abstain from marijuana for a while and you've been a chronic user, your serotonin and dopamine levels may not be great. They may not be at a good baseline level, so you're going to experience anxiety and perhaps depression too. And the literature does reflect a lot of that. It doesn't mean directly that you're getting depressed or anxious from your marijuana consumption, but because you've done it so much, you've kind of ruined your hardware a little bit, and now you're gonna have lower baseline levels of serotonin, lower baseline levels of dopamine, and more likely to have anxious and depressive states. Okay, so this is why people become addicted, because they haven't figured out a way to cope with their own stuff mentally. And I'm gonna get into deeper on that with my interventions on how we can avoid addictive behaviors but still have healthy relationships with marijuana, okay? And so, but the main thing with this serotonin and dopamine part is that this is a big explanation for why there are associations between emotional dysregulation, so issues with like understanding your emotions or interpreting what's going on emotionally in your life, and the regular marijuana users. So those people that are consuming marijuana frequently, there is certainly a connection with emotional dysregulation. And so this suggests why people create dependence with marijuana, and partly because of that hijacking that happens, allowing people to escape from mental stress, anxiety, and depressive states. Okay, now we're gonna talk about how to craft a healthy relationship now with marijuana and avoid addictive behaviors with it. So now that we are aware of how it all works, we're aware of the general functions of our endocannabinoid system, how it affects us mentally and physically, and the concerns of chronic consumptions. Let's dive into it. So like I stated in the intro, some people may be able to handle this excessive consumption and live productive lives, but this is for you guys that can't get off the couch right now, and you're sitting there smoking weed all the time. You gotta quit. You gotta figure out something. You gotta get a better grip on your behaviors. So listen up now. Number 1, meditate. You have to observe your thoughts and feelings. You gotta become aware of your relationship with marijuana and meditate on what triggers you to utilize marijuana to hide from your existential pain. So perhaps there are several personality barriers within yourself, or even past trauma that prevent you from becoming in touch with your own natural, sober emotional states. And if you're living like this unhealthy lifestyle, you know, meditation statistically is associated with significant improvements in well-being and emotional regulation. So we gotta meditate. You gotta understand what's going on in your head, why you feel like you need to consume weed all the time to hide from your issue. Number 2, now we gotta journal. So positive psychological journaling practices, they support the controlling of addictive behaviors. So you gotta put your real thoughts down on paper. You gotta clarify what you're thinking and what your intentions are. When you know what you're thinking and you know what your intentions are, it's easier to follow through with what your intentions are. So if you're being held back by these addictive behaviors, you know, perhaps you're using marijuana to escape from your real emotional reckoning that you need to experience, you know, either through journaling or through meditation. We gotta get this down on paper. You gotta get it down on paper, and it's going to make a huge difference. That's why it's preached all the time. Write, journal. Number 3, prioritize your health and fitness. Increasing aerobic endurance through exercise, it's associated with improving the endogenous cannabinoid levels, 2-AG and anandamide. So there's a zillion things that exercise will improve in your life, and you know, evoking a healthy endocannabinoid response is just one of them. But it's super cool actually, because that's why people fall in love with exercise, because you get that quote unquote, you get that runner's high. And so prioritize your health and fitness. That's going to make things much easier for you as you try to get a grip on your addictive behaviors, and they're gonna help increase your endocannabinoid levels. Number 4, we have to try extended bouts of abstinence. If you can't take a week off or 2 weeks off, Are 2 days off? How do you certainly have an addictive problem, right? So we have to try abstinence. And right now I'm running Sober October promotion. It's October 11th or whatever, so there's like 20 days left. So if you're looking to try 20 days of sobriety with marijuana, try it out. But you have to challenge yourself with abstinence, because if you can make it through 1 day, then you can make it through 2 days. If you can make it through 2 days, you can make it through 2 weeks. If you can make it through 2 weeks, you can make it through 2 months. The main thing is you don't want to be handcuffed to your substances. You need to have your own satisfaction with your own brain states, because when you're allowing psychoactive substances to hide from your existential pain and your emotional reckoning you need to have, you're not going to have the character develop you need. And so the difficult part about many addictions, especially with these psychoactive substances, is that we condition and then we encode the behaviors into nearly all the aspects in our daily routines. And so they become neurologically wired into our brain and our patterns of behavior. And so this is difficult to make changes around because it just becomes so habitual. But you have to go out and make the challenge. You have to abstain. You got to do it, because that's the only way you can unwire what you've wired previously into your brain. Okay? So initially might feel impossible to do abstinence, but you know it will be your best interest if you can consciously control your thoughts and behaviors. And once you've meditated, once you've journaled and prioritized your health and fitness, trying abstinence is totally going to make a huge difference and is going to teach you how to take care of your mind and body through your own intentions. Okay, last step, we got to visualize who we want to be. You know, likely the person you want to be does not have behavioral crutches with substances. So during your meditative practices, you got to visualize the personality traits and characteristics that you seek to adopt and develop into part of your life. And if you're honest with yourself, you probably don't see this person that you want to become. You don't see that person as someone that needs to rely on a substance to enjoy their life. Okay, so we have to develop the mindset to achieve the future that we're visualizing, and we can't do that without practicing visualization. We have to know what it feels like, know what it would look like to have the proper behavior patterns that we want. So we got to visualize. And so that will sum up of what you need to do to handle your addictive behaviors with marijuana. You got to journal, you got to meditate, you got to get your health and fitness on point, you got to try abstinence, for sure, and you got to visualize the personality characteristics that you are trying to develop. So thank you for watching this video. I'm Ethan Etchart. I'm a personal trainer. I focus on helping those with addictive tendencies, addictive behaviors. I've helped people lose crazy amounts of weight. I've helped people break addictions with alcohol and nicotine. And so this is what I do as a personal trainer. I help with addictive behaviors. And so follow my content, subscribe, join my Facebook group. It's called Electrify Your Life Through Fitness. And so the links are all below. Check out my website, subscribe to my newsletter, subscribe to this channel, check out my social, Instagram. I got it all. I'm putting up all the information out there all the time. So follow this if you're interested in learning how to optimize your well-being and prevent addictive behaviors and develop proper behavioral practices. That's what this channel's for. That's what my content's for. So please follow, like, thanks for watching. I appreciate you guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.